just to start off, I guess, how would you describe antinatalism in layman terms, and for someone that's completely oblivious to it?
Yeah, sure. So first off, thanks so much for reaching out to me and for watching the Soft White Underbelly video. This is so awesome. So I mean, antinatalism in the simplest terms, exactly as I described it in the Soft White Underbelly video, it is the belief that it is unethical to have children, to produce new lives. And again, this can apply to human lives, it can apply to animal lives, it can apply to sentient machines. As you were mentioning, antinatalism, in its contemporary form, really only came about in 2006 with the release of David Benatar's Better Never to Have Been. David Benatar is a South African philosopher, and that was sort of the seminal antinatalist work in contemporary times. But the idea itself does have its roots in, some of the earliest examples of sort of antinatalist-like thinking can be traced back to ancient Egypt. Lots of ancient Greek philosophers said antinatally kind of things. There's even examples of antinatalist thinking in the Bible. Really, throughout time, people have had sort of inklings of antinatalism. There's been a lot of antinatal whispers throughout time.
Right.
But really, since 2006, it's become this sort of contemporary philosophical position. And I would say since 2010, it's also started to grow as a social movement.
Okay, and were you always an antinatalist? I mean, like you said, the term was coined in 2006 officially.
Yeah.
I mean, before that, did you have those thoughts of, whether, life is really, I guess, worth, being, procreating and creating? Was that sort of, how you were always, and then 2006 came and then it became official?
So I had my own inklings of antinatalist thinking since I was a really little kid. So like as I said in the Soft White Underbelly video, I was really obsessed with monsters as a young kid, and so I thought a lot about Frankenstein, and sort of Frankenstein seemed like it was making some sort of commentary in the negative on the subject of procreation, and vampires also seemed to be making some sort of commentary in the negative about procreation. When vampires create other vampires, which then goes on to create more victims. So that just sort of seemed like there was a procreative corollary sort of thing. And then also another hero of mine as a young kid was the Phantom of the Opera, which is full of birth lamentation and all kinds of things like that, expressions like that. And so that was in the back of my mind from a very early time in my life. But there's absolutely nothing in our culture that supports this way of thinking. And so it like so many people that I come across, that have had these thoughts since very early childhood, it just sort of gets suppressed. It just sort of gets ignored. It just sort of gets pushed down. And it really was just out of the blue that I happened to come across people speaking about it on YouTube. And it's interesting because when I first found people speaking about this idea on YouTube, the word hadn't been really connected to the ideas people were speaking about. Like, obviously, so if we're going back in time, 2010, I'm watching people talk about anti-procreation, but they weren't saying the word antinatalism yet, because what they were doing, what the people that I was watching were doing, and sort of the work of David Benatar and these other antinatalist philosophers that were creating, works of actual antinatalist philosophy, those connections hadn't been made yet. And then all of a sudden, we learned this term because somebody by the name of Derived Energy started making videos and challenging people to argue Benatarian antinatalism. And so that was this incredible moment, this sort of spark in time where all of these very sort of important connections between the philosophy and this young social movement started to be connected. And that created an explosion of interest during that time
Right.
around the subject of antinatalism.
Okay, and one thing I was curious about is, does each anti-natalist have different reasons as to why they're anti-natalists?
Absolutely. So if you, I'm a sentiocentric antinatalist. So my antinatalism extends to humans, to animals, to sentient machines, to anything that has the possibility of feeling pain, of feeling suffering, of having negative experiences. And my antinatalism is very whatever you want to call social media based. It's academic based. That is not always the case for all antinatalists. Some antinatalists come from a very strict academic world. Some only come from sort of what it has existed and grown, through the internet. I'm a moderator on the largest English-speaking antinatalist community online, which is r/antinatalism on Reddit. And you spend like 2 seconds there, you're going to find that not everybody believes the same thing. I mean, some people end up on that board because they believe that antinatalism is about hating your parents, or they believe that it's about hating work, or it's about being unhappy, or it's about being depressed, or it's about all of these different things. I mean, one thing I want to make clear is that, which I probably should have said already, is that antinatalism has actually no standard definition. It is not in any English dictionary. Currently, I actually have campaigned twice to have it added into the Oxford English Dictionary, to no avail. It is defined in 2 French dictionaries, but in a way that, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find actual antinatalists that are antinatalists because of any of the reasons that the French dictionary gives. So in this period of time that we're in, what antinatalism is very amorphous. It shifts from antinatalist to antinatalist. It's sort of finding its feet as far as what it is, who it represents, what it wants to be, and what it wants its future to be.
Right, and essentially what you're saying is that regardless of how you get to antinatalism, the bottom line is that procreation and giving birth is unethical. However you get to that point.
Yeah, I think that would be fair. I think that there's sort of a shared kernel amongst all antinatalists, and that is to begin life, whatever kind of life it is definitely nobody agrees on, but yeah, that birth and procreation is a negative thing.
Right.
But like, not all antinatalists are extinctionists. There's besides the kernel, we can't agree on anything else.
Right. Okay, and you said that your stance on anti-natalism is through pain and suffering. So like you basically, you think that anti-natalism, you believe that anti-natalism, you support it because of the pain and the suffering that we experience in human life.
Well, for me, it's in all lives, or all possible lives. So yeah, antinatalism is it's basically, I call it perfect prevention. It is the simplest way to simply prevent problems before they begin. When we create lives, we do so for absolutely no reason other than our own selfish desires. We, as living things, we have all kinds of notions about what life is. People that want to have children have all kinds of notions about what those lives will be, who those people will be, and that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with reality. And so, yeah, the easiest thing to do is to simply not roll the dice, to not take risks with somebody else's welfare, to not impose harm. Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, one view I have on that, I mean, one pushback I would say I have on that is, I mean, the fact that, you're here and, you were born and you're here speaking on it. I mean, are you basically saying that you would rather not be here? I mean, the fact that you're here and living and, you are, able to be on this podcast and speak about these things. I mean, aren't you grateful that your parents, gave birth to you, and you are enjoying the many good things about life, right? Like
I'm not grateful that they took risks with my sentient welfare. I'm not grateful that I am on this course towards an inevitable death. I am grateful that I had a very good childhood. I'm grateful for, I mean, once somebody else has decided that you're going to live, it's very, very difficult to break your own life. I mean, if life becomes an addiction, you do form attachments to things. There's just no question about that at all. And I do take every ability I possibly can to enjoy my own life. I'm a toy collector. I'm an artist. I have all kinds of great shit in my life. But the fact of the matter is, when you create somebody, there's no guarantee that that new individual is not going to be you. It's not going to be anybody else that's ever existed before. And it may very well be somebody who experiences great harm, great suffering, and is not grateful to be here, is not somebody that wants to be here. And the fact of the matter is, we don't have the right to die. There is, you're in Canada, so there's, you're a little bit luckier than most in that if you wanted to have medically assisted suicide, that is an option. I'm not sure about Vancouver, but I mean, some places in Canada, at least, that is a possibility. But that's not the way that it is anywhere else in the world. To have to end one's life is an incredibly awful, violent act. I mean, just because you may have a negative opinion about life doesn't mean that you want to be in pain. Doesn't mean that you want to. There's nothing hypocritical about remaining alive, especially when you have the notion that maybe you have a job to do while you're here. And part of my job to do while I'm alive is to try to prevent lives as an anti-natalist. So I will remain alive as long as I can.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair, it's fair to your point where, you can't predict someone's life and what life course they're going to be taking, whether they do fall into addiction or crime or poverty or anything like that. And I understand that, but I mean, for the most part, I think there's a lot of beauty in the struggle of life. I mean, wouldn't you be able to agree that most of the struggles that people do go through, and this is for a very select population of the world. I mean, there's a lot of places that are underprivileged and don't have the luxury of being able to be as successful as other parts of the world, and I understand that, but for the most part, just, being able to overcome obstacles and being resilient, and, when you do get to the end of your life, looking back on your life and saying that, I accomplished all these things and I'm proud of where I am. I'm just trying to, and I'm not taking anything away from anti-natalism, but I think that there is a, it's basically a yin and yang type thing. For the amount of pain that one goes through, there's also the same amount of beauty on the other side of it, maybe even more. And that's not for everyone, I understand. But what do you?
Well, I think we're very lucky if we have a balance in our lives. I mean, I don't think that there's any sort of the mechanisms that created us, DNA, doesn't have any kind of we're going to give you, there's no cosmic scoreboard, so to speak. There's no, you're going to give you a little bit of pain, you get this amount of pleasure in return. There's absolutely nothing in life that guarantees any kind of balance, any kind of, unfortunately, it really isn't everybody's story at all that we look back on life and go, hey, I accomplished this. This is great. This was, I overcame this. Look, I love individuals. I love hard work. I think it's incredible when people can achieve things and can overcome things. Those are all beautiful things. But the fact of the matter is, these problems weren't begun for any good reason whatsoever. Again, other than somebody else's selfish desire to have a child, to put somebody else on this planet. So I would much rather see somebody live their own life. I mean, invest in your own existence. There's nothing wrong with somebody saying, I would like to strive, I would like to succeed, I would like to have ambitions. Live your life so that perhaps by your efforts, somebody else will not have to endure theirs, because frankly, not everybody ends up at that conclusion at all. There's thousands of people sitting in retirement homes or nursing homes who don't have some sort of positive opinion of their existence.
And I completely understand that, in the sense that, if someone was to come up to me, if I saw someone that was financially very unstable or living in a really poor environment and situation, and a lot of things going on in their lives. I mean, for example, off the top of my head, if someone was living in a war zone during World War II, and a woman and a man decide, oh, let's start a family, I would be inclined to say, hey, you should probably second guess on that. Take a couple,
right. Everybody's a little bit anti-natalist.
Yeah, a little bit. Like in that situation, I'd be okay. Like you might want to think it a little bit more. There's going to be like airstrike coming over your heads in about a few weeks. I don't know if this is the right time to start a family, but and I understand that. And for someone like for you, Alex, like I don't know if I don't want to bring this up. I don't want to get too personal with you, but I remember what you told me, that you would never have children, or you don't really want children because
I definitely don't want children.
You definitely don't want children because you're not
41.
Very good.
I'm not going to have children.
Yeah, and you're not
never
going to have.
Good job, Alex.
Yeah.
I love my nephews, but children in small doses.
But the reasoning for you is because you mentioned that you're not very good with kids and you don't really want it to disrupt your life, and that's okay. But I guess for someone that's maybe, let's say, really wealthy and lives in a great neighborhood and lives in a place with a lot of freedom, for that person to come up to you and say, hey, Amanda, I want to start a family, you would still be like, no, don't do it.
No, absolutely not. It has nothing to do with material wealth, or life can go just as poorly no matter what kind of circumstances you're born into, and we all die. And death is dying is not a nice circumstance at all. I don't know if you've ever watched somebody die, but that is an unavoidable part of being born. And it's I wouldn't impose that on anybody.
I actually,
but yes, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Amanda, because I think this is a very fascinating topic that I don't know a lot about, but the underlying concepts of antinatalism, I don't agree overall, but it actually does bring up some very, very good points that actually kind of align with my own personal views and experiences, because ever since I was a teenager, I just knew I never wanted kids, and there are very valid reasons for not wanting them. And also, a lot of people, you brought this up yourself, Amanda, about selfishness, and it's true that that a lot of people just have kids for the sake of having kids. There's a societal, these are all constructs that we've made up. Like, you must have kids at a certain age, and also your own internal biological clock. That's also another thing that people are constantly battling. But I do find it fascinating. One thing that I would like to discuss with you is about how, on the one hand, antinatalism says, well, you shouldn't have children, but what about the way that human beings are architected? Because internally, you could argue all living things have an internal biological desire to procreate, to basically to sustain this species. At a real simple level, that's what it's about. It is just about basically keeping your species alive, and that's what it comes down to. So where does that come into play with the whole philosophical nature of antinatalism versus our own biological designs? Because I feel like those two things are clashing with each other.
Yeah. So we have an innate desire to have sex. I would sort of say that sex is the way that the DNA sort of tricks us into procreating. We do not have a biological pressure or innate desire to to procreate specifically. You know, animals have absolutely no idea what they're doing when they have sex. They don't know that reproduction will be the result of that. And humans are, as animals, are absolutely no different from that. So we have a sexual drive. The sexual drive leads to procreation. We have an incredible amount of societal pressure to procreate. I mean, this is something that Matti Häyry, the Finnish philosopher, antinatalist philosopher, and I, write a lot about in our newest paper, Imposing a Lifestyle, a New Argument for Antinatalism, which is on the Cambridge Quarterly of Healthcare Ethics. And, we talk about how there's sort of, when you are brought into existence as a human being, you are inundated with something called like the postnatal mental imposition, which is basically this pressure on you from the time that you're a tiny child to, grow up to be a procreator at threat of, major societal costs. And this is something that I kind of wish I talked a lot about on the Soft White Underbelly interview, especially in relation to women. I mean, the value of women in so many of our societies is connected to them eventually growing into being mothers. And if you don't fall into that, if that's not something that you want, or if that's something that you sort of reject, then there's a cost to that. There's a social cost to that. Of maybe you're not gonna honor mother and father. They're gonna be upset with you because they want grandkids, and maybe you're gonna be different than your peer group and everything. And those are terrifying pressures that are put on men and women, and that keeps people procreating a lot. But again, human beings have known how to break the connection between sex and procreation for a long, long, long time. We have those tools. But there's nothing, but again, I don't believe that, that we have sex with, if we are having sex with the desire to procreate, that desire to procreate is there because of what society has built into us, not because there is some sort of biological drive to produce children. We're biologically designed to produce children, but it's not an instinct to.
Fair. Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was gonna bring that up, and you brought that up perfectly. There's a lot of pressure on women in particular to, a lot of their value as a woman is, dictated on the fact that if they do have a family and they have kids and they are being a caregiver. And I know of a few older women close to me that don't have kids, and there is that sense, there is a little bit of that void within them and that insecurity. And I agree with that. That is a societal pressure that I think is wrong. I think that, for whatever reason, if a woman does not ever become pregnant and have a child, it's, for a myriad of reasons. It doesn't, it is what it is. It doesn't diminish the woman's value of being a woman. It shouldn't. And, you would even praise those women for, not having kids. And
absolutely.
I keep thinking back to myself personally, and like why I would have kids. I think for me, it is in a way for selfish reasons, because I do want to feel fulfilled, and I do want to be able to say that this is my creation and this is, a part of me. And
I would say it's also a way of kind of skirting with the whole scary notion of your own mortality, that you're not going to be around anymore. And it gives you some sense of, ease and calmness, that, especially if, you look at your kid and you see a part of yourself in them, and it just gives you some, again, this is totally selfish. It just feels like, you are going to not exist at some point. And maybe the thought of somebody else kind of being like almost a mini version of you out there kind of gives you this, confidence that, it's silly, but that's how it is.
Carrying on your legacy.
Yeah. Well, not even carrying on your legacy, but I think just being like, it just feels like, I don't know, for me, I feel like if I did have kids And if I saw a part of myself in them, I would feel like no matter what they do, at least there's a part of me, my knowledge, my experience that's kind of live on in a way.
I understand all that completely, and I don't go around saying that it's silly or anything like that, really. I mean, I think part of that is how badly we deal with the subject of mortality, right? Because let's face it, like, aside from being selfish, it also is not often the way it turns out, right? Like, the apple doesn't really fall... That, the whole saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I mean, that's not reality. I mean, sometimes the apple is an orange, often. But I understand the need for, death is a scary thing. Not being here, and the idea of our non-existence is a scary thing. And I understand how people fall into the idea that having a child gives a sense of immortality. And I understand sort of, how often people have to fight for their own identities in life, right? Like how much bullshit and pushback people have to endure in order to just be themselves. And the idea that, like, you only really have yourself for a very limited period of time, right? Like, you as an individual, each of us as individuals are only really here for a brief period of time. And even while we're alive, right? Like, stuff happens, Alzheimer's happened, like, the way you want to be is very finite. You know what I mean? And so trying to hang on to that any way possible, I do definitely get, as far as, a terror and a fear, and you want to do whatever possible to hang on to some of that. But the fact of the matter is, the person that you create, or the possible people that you may bring into this world, are not going to be you. They're going to be an entirely new person. They may have some little inklings of who you are, but that's not always the case, to be perfectly honest.
No, you're right. And I think that's the lie that we sell ourselves to as human beings, that they're going to be, and I even hear this with my parents too. They say, well, I had kids because I want someone to be able to take care of me when I'm old. I'm like, would you have a crystal ball? Did you have any idea of how do you know I could have turned out to be a drug addict? You don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea if your kids are going to be capable of even taking care of you. Who knows what the kind of relationship you're going to have with your kids? That's definitely something that you just don't know that stuff.
Yeah. And if I may say, I mean, I think, look, the state of elder care is really bad. Like, it's bad all over the world. I mean, once we get to a certain age, the idea that you have to produce people in order to have any kind of quality of life once you can't take care of yourself is a real societal problem. And it's one that has to be addressed outside of this idea of producing new people. It's just not an ad, because look, how many people are in nursing homes in these kinds of situations with absolutely nobody, that have tons of kids, and they never get taken care of, they never get visited. It's just not the way reality pans out.
I've seen that.
Whatsoever.
I've been in in those care facilities with my grandmother had Parkinson's and then got dementia, and towards the last couple of years of her life when she was there, she half the time didn't know where she was mixing up, and just watching the rest of the patrons, you just realize how deeply depressing and what a sad environment that is for people, and I really wish it was different.
Well, okay, so with that, I don't want to be too negative, and I don't want to really bring down the mood here, but
now's the time for it. We're talking about antinatalism.
I mean, I'm 27, I'm healthy still, and if there's a possibility of me becoming really old and getting dementia and Parkinson's and getting all these illnesses and diseases, and knowing that I will get sick and old and die one day, why don't I just kill myself right now? Why don't I just end my suffering right now?
Because you have utility as a living thing to do the right thing, which I think is advocating for the right to die. When you decide that it's your time, your death should be treated like any other medical condition. You should have access to a medically assisted euthanasia. And so the dead can't speak that truth. The living have to do it. So I think that you should have the right to die. I think that you should have the right to decide that whenever you decide that it's your time. But the fact of the matter is, most don't. And most don't make that fight. Most don't spend their time on Earth making any movement towards that movement. And so if that is something that you believe in, I would say your life has great utility now to try to fight for that.
Right. Okay. I personally, I like the struggles in my life, and I enjoy overcoming them and prospering after and embracing them. And I think that there is a true emotion that comes from that, and that's something I believe that everyone should experience. And I guess what I'm trying to say is there an argument that could persuade you, or you could be able to understand where someone is coming from against anti-natalism? Like, at any point, is there any way that someone could persuade you?
Well, people have certainly tried. I've been doing this for almost 14 years.
Yeah.
The answer so far is no. My mind is always open. I mean, it truly is. If somebody can make a really kick-ass argument as to why antinatalism is false, I'm all for accepting that. But no, not yet. Right. Look, again, I've overcome great adversity in my life as well, and that gives me all kinds of incredible feelings of, being my own main character and all that, and I think, look, I hope for that for anybody who's actually alive. For anyone who's already here, I hope that people will be able to overcome and prosper and all of those wonderful things, truly wonderful things. I'm not trying to be facetious about any of that whatsoever. But the fact, it just comes back to the act of before you exist, you're not in need of any of these wonderful things. You're not in need of. There's nobody there. There's nobody there in need of a successful career or to overcome adversity or to triumph, to do any of this. And so there's no harm in not creating somebody. There's every possibility for harm in going through with the act.
Right. But isn't there also a possibility for great happiness as well? There is a risk on both ends of it, but the happiness I've been through and the joy and the love that I've experienced throughout my life, I could roll the dice with my children and say that I want them to experience those same joys.
So let's say you have a child that is very happy and you have another child that has cancer. I mean, you cannot know what the outcome of either of those realities was going to be before you made the decision to produce either. And what could possibly be worth the child with cancer?
And what you're basically saying with anti-natalism is, why put a child in that position to be at risk of having cancer?
Yeah,
right.
To impose those risks, to impose without consent. I mean, consent is a tricky argument because it sounds like what I'm saying is, that you should have asked that for that possible person. There's nobody there to ask, but that's the nature of consent. When you can't get consent, you don't take it. Like if somebody is drunk, you can't get consent to have sex with that person. You don't have sex with that person. When it doesn't exist and you can do something to that possible person that will completely impose your will, completely manipulate their entire lives moving forward, you don't enact the manipulation. You don't go against that consent.
Absolutely. Okay. That's a very, very fair point, and I understand why it basically comes off as selfish when someone does decide to procreate, and because they don't know what they're bringing their child into, and you can only make it as there's only so much you can do to make the situation and environment as suitable as possible in terms of having being stable financially, being in a a good community, and in a good place. But other than that, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can't control.
Exactly.
Like you said, like diseases, illnesses, sickness, cancer, stuff like that. And I guess, there have been, I'm not going to sit here and say to you that, my whole life has been great and I've been happy the whole time, and that's farthest thing from the truth. And there have been many times in my life where I'm going through something and I do think, damn, man, I really wish I wasn't born. Like, God damn it. Like, I wish my mom hadn't gave birth to me for me to feel this anxiety and this depression. Truly, truly, I understand that. But there is a side of me, there is a part of me where I just can't imagine myself not being born. I just can't imagine.
Sure, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
I can't imagine myself not having, feeling these things and these emotions. And I guess, I'm really trying to figure out ways to.
Amanda, I want to ask you a very pointed question here, because I'm still learning this as I go here.
Of course.
But with antinatalism, what's the end game with the argument? Is antinatalism saying that the very nature of existence is evil? Are we saying that basically, are we advocating that no life should exist? Because if you don't procreate, then you have nothing.
Yeah. So, right. So, again, this is one of the things that there's a great deal of disagreement on within antinatalism, sorry. So, yeah, so the mantra in the antinatalist community is extinction is the result, not the goal. I don't disagree with that. I think it is the goal. I think extinction is the best outcome that we can aim for. But not every antinatalist would agree with that. I don't really know exactly where they would stop, essentially. Like, a question I typically ask antinatalists that say that is, like, if you knew that your words, that your activism was leading towards extinction, like, at what point are you going to become a natalist? Like, it doesn't always make a lot of sense to me as far as where that begins and ends. But yes, nothing. a lifeless universe would be the best possible outcome, because nothing is in harm's way at that point. And so I forgot the first part of your question, but essentially, I mean, you could say, even though forms of sort of pre-antinatalism or have kind of one foot in religion, like as we talked about a little bit before, contemporary antinatalism, you could say, is like the last stop on the there is no God train, right? Like, there's nowhere else to go. So it is sort of supremely atheistic. So it is unintelligent design. That's what life is. There's no higher purpose being served. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing in the universe that we're not tying anything in the universe's shoe. We're not feeding something out there that needs us. We're just here, and there's all of this suffering for absolutely no need. There's all this need for no need, for absolutely no good reason. And again, we've done a lot of great things as human beings too. We've made some phenomenal art. We've done this. We've done that. There is going to be an end to it all, whether we cause it or not. And so I think that, again, it's sort of as I was saying on this White Underbelly episode, there will be a future of humanity. The possible sort of projected futures that sort of people want, I think, are a lot more dangerous than antinatalism. A lot more dangerous, potentially dangerous, than non-existence. And so as far as the safest possible future, I think nothing is it.
Right.
Would you agree that a big aspect of your anti-natalism is the idea that humans and human nature, we're inherently malevolent and we're destructive, greedy, selfish, and that's a big part of it, and because it's in our nature as humans to be destructive and create wars and hate and death, and that's a big part of your stance?
Well, I stay away from the word evil, because evil is that's a religious concept. But I mean, certainly all of that's true. I mean, human beings do cause a lot of harm. We cause a lot of harm to other animals. We cause a lot of harm to ourselves. I mean, and there is such a thing called misanthropic antinatalism, which is, would essentially, and misanthropy is a tricky word because it typically means hatred, and I really know antinatalism really is about hate. I don't hate anybody. That's not the driving force of anything to do with my antinatalism or most antinatalism. Certainly not academic antinatalism. But yeah, I mean, those are all truths of about humanity, right? Is that we do all of this harm, and by extent, the animals also harm each other. I mean, the old, I hate it when people use this expression. I can't believe I'm about to, but nature is red in tooth and claw. It's billions of years of sentient creatures ripping each other apart. That's the history of life on this planet. But I would say that antinatalism is not about punishing humanity or punishing life on the planet with non-existence because we're bad. I don't think we're bad. We are what we are. The function of DNA is to create beings that can compete with one another, to compete with the environment, to create a gladiator war so that there's a winner, and everything that loses, that isn't the winner is the loser, and so there's all this, that's its own huge source of suffering creation.
Right.
So again, it's got nothing to do with hatred. It's got nothing to do with punishment. It's just assessing the fact that, okay, we're the products of unintelligent design. It creates all of this waste in the form of suffering, and that we're intelligent enough to see that, and we can see the fact that we're not perpetuating it for any other reason other than the fact that we're addicted to it.
What about the opposite argument? Because I tend to approach, and I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying, but also I tend to take I tend to gravitate towards the Gene Roddenberry utopian ideal, that we have to have hope that, a lot of these problems that we have in our world are fixable, because ultimately we are flawed as human beings. But I think we could also strive to fix a lot of these problems. There doesn't have to be poverty, right? There doesn't have to be, we should take better care of each other, and we shouldn't be as greedy as we are. And I think a lot of those problems ultimately are solvable. On the other hand, of course, it's also very difficult to solve those problems because ultimately we are selfish, and so people are ultimately going to care more about themselves than they are the greater good, and that is a big problem. And it could take, if we don't destroy ourselves first, it could take, who knows, thousands of years before we get to that point where we do finally wake up and realize, we're destroying the environment, and also we don't really need to be spending billions of dollars on the military war machine. We could probably let's actually throw some of that money at our schools, our education systems, because ultimately too, I've made this argument on many other podcasts as we talk about a lot of this stuff, is that a lot of the problems that we deal with when it comes to crime, when it comes to racism, xenophobia, a lot of that is education. We're living in our own silos. These people don't experience the world. They don't experience other cultures. And if they just opened up their eyes to what's going on in the rest of the planet, then maybe they would be better off. And also, if we had better education from the get-go, then we wouldn't be putting people out there in the world that are completely ill-equipped and ill-prepared to really deal with their whole environment.
Yeah, thank you for that, Alex. I mean, so let me just start off by saying that I think that antinatalism is incredibly hopeful. I know that to most ears, it seems like the exact opposite of that, but there's nothing more hopeful than prevention, in my opinion. If you don't start problems in the first place, that is a cure. I mean, it is essentially the same oath that doctors take, the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. So that is essentially what an antinatalist is saying by saying don't create problems in the first place, don't have children, don't create life. Listen, I agree with you 100% in the idea that there's many problems on this planet that we could be fixing. We could fix them today if we wanted to. We could fix the education system. We could fix poverty. We could do all of these things. There's no question about that. And look, if we were going. If it's Monday today, we're going, we're going extinct through antinatalism, or on Wednesday, but we can cure racism or poverty or any number of these things on Tuesday. I would still say we should make every effort to cure those things on Tuesday. But the reason I'd still say we should go extinct on Wednesday, continue with that itinerary, is because I think that there are a lot of problems that we can't fix. And I think that we also bump into we will bump into issues trying to fix our problems where we will inevitably create worse problems. So let's say that we do go the transhumanist route, which is what a lot of people want, or the long-termist route. I think that the potential of creating entirely new forms of suffering, hitherto unknown, are entirely possible. The minute that we start trying to cure death, that we try to annihilate negative experiences from the human mind, the human genome.
Right.
There's every there is some possibility that could go the way that could go in a positive direction, but there's a lot of possibility that could go exactly in the opposite direction. So I think that there are some problems we can fix, but we can't fix the big picture.
Have you ever seen the movie Equilibrium? Is
that the one with
Christian Bale?
Christian Bale with the gun cocktail.
Yeah, so
I've seen that.
For those that haven't seen it, basically, it's kind of set in a dystopian future where effectively the entire world they've basically come up with a drug that you have to inject yourself with on a daily basis, and what it does is it suppresses emotions. And so the thought behind that is, if we can suppress our hatred and our anger and all the negative aspects of ourselves, that we can have a more quote-unquote utopian society. But effectively what it does is you end up having a completely lifeless society, devoid of any kind of love and all joys and passions and all the wonderful positive aspects of being human. And I kind of think of that. It's kind of like, it sounded like you were sort of hinting about that too. But I think that moral issues aside, what do you think about the idea if we could, through gene therapy, if we could guarantee that when we procreate, we're going to introduce another living being into the world. If we could guarantee that everybody is going to be free of all birth defects and have a certain level of intelligence, wouldn't that be a good thing too?
But that literally would never happen. But I get what you're saying. Oh, sorry.
No, not at all. Don't worry about it. Well, I mean, look, I think that there is some argument to make that certain things should be. I mean, if you can, there's certain things that do, like certain kinds of cancers, all these kinds of things. If we can get rid of these things from any possibility of occurring when we create somebody, that's great. Like I am for trying to make life as good as we can. But again, I just don't think that I think that when we create somebody, it is a manipulation, no matter how good you can make it. It is still insisting that this being that you're pulling out of nothing exists to play by rules that you set, to have to live in a society, to have to do what it dictates, what the society dictates. And I think that there is a lack of efficacy in that very notion. If we were able to cure death, let's just use that as an example. So if we did achieve some sort of medically induced immortality, the funny thing is that that would have to become an antinatalist world, right? Like you could not keep producing new people in a world where nobody
you're
dies.
absolutely right. Yeah. We only have so much room on the planet.
Yeah, but
so much resources. Yeah, sorry.
But on my end, I would I actually thought about this recently. It's terrifying to me to think that I would live forever. I don't want to live forever though. So there's there is a part of me where sorry. I don't want to keep interrupting you, but
no, you're fine.
The idea of death scares me, but the idea of living forever also scares me, maybe even more.
See, I'm the complete opposite. I think about death on a daily basis, and it frightens me. And I would love to live forever. I don't want to.
Okay? So let me ask you, Alex. The thought of death scares you, but are you? Is it so much that you wish you weren't born?
No.
Yeah, there you go. You're not an anti-natalist, Betty.
Well, no, there's nothing. So I could live a really long time, to be honest with you, because I am incredibly easily occupied. Like I have a lot of hobbies. I have a lot of interests. I can make art forever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's nothing un-antinatalist about immortality, so long as nobody else is brought into existence. And so long as there's also the caveat of the right to die. If we make immortality, if we make ourselves so immortal, let's say, that being, crushed by a piano won't kill you, I don't want none of that. You know what I mean? I don't want to be alive and live an eternal crushed by piano kind of life. Mm-hmm. But if we can, so long as we have the right to die and had immortality and nobody else is brought into existence, fine. There's nothing un-antinatalist about that. And frankly, you'd still have extinction because I don't think we're gonna cure the heat death of the universe eventually. Right. Like at some point, it just does go away.
That actually brings me to my next point that I was thinking of as well. So would you agree that doomers and anti-natalists go hand in hand?
Not necessarily. I mean, first of all, a lot of doomers. I produced I've never actually spoken to him like one-on-one before, but I did produce an interview with what's the guy's name? The guy from Nature Bats Last. I'll think of his name in a second. I'm sorry, I'm blanking.
Was he
right
on Soft White Underbelly by any chance?
No, he wasn't. Okay. He wasn't. But yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a number of doomers. I know a lot of doomers. And the interesting thing is that a lot of doomers are not anti-natalists. Or they're interested, or even if they are sort of conditionally anti-natalist, even sort of conditionally extinctionist, they still want to preserve something. Like, we'll go extinct because we'll avoid the effects of climate change, but it's kind of the same attitude as like cryogenics, right? Like we'll freeze ourselves, and then where things are better, or where they've cured this disease, we'll live again. So that's not for me. Right. But so I think that there's definitely some corollaries, in that certainly doomers think that things are. A doomer would not necessarily have the opinion that even at the best of times, it's not you shouldn't bring life into existence. So I would say that, like at the time of history that we're in, this is sort of an especially bad time to bring a new human life or any kind of life in general into existence. But I don't think it was ever a good time to bring life into existence.
Right.
And that would not, a doomer would probably not have that opinion.
Fair. One thing you said about, doomers, at the end of the day do have a little bit of that will to keep some sort of preservation available. Mm-hmm. My question for you is that wouldn't, I know this is far from it ever becoming a reality, and there's a very low chance that this would ever happen, but the idea that at some point, maybe in human history, that there will be a point in time where complete utopia and bliss and a world void of all issues and problems could be possible, and preserving that little bit of humanity, wouldn't you want to, I guess, maybe risk and hope that maybe one day that we can achieve that? maybe far from far from our lifetime. Maybe.
Well, I think you'd have to sacrifice an enormous number of generations for that incredibly slim, possibly non-existent chance.
Right.
So I'm not willing to sign my kids up. I love my kids too much, my non-existent children. I love them too much to impose life on them for the possibility of bliss that they won't even see in their lifetimes. I don't believe that we'll ever get there. I really do.
I don't believe that either. I'm with you on that. It's just, I'm just thinking percentages here, maybe.
Yeah, of course. I think that as living things, like, we really, even I at times want to believe that, right? Like, I do like, there's a lot of things that I love about humanity. Like, there's individuals, there's the art that we make, there's we got a lot of shitty parts to it. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I'm just,
absolutely.
We have there's a lot of mixed in with our negatives. There's some real positives, and I think when you're an extinctionist, there is a aspect of living your life that becomes one of mourning, right? Like there becomes, you are sort of saying goodbye to it all, because that it's not only going to go away no matter what you do, and no matter, but you're also advocating that it go away. So there is a piece of your life that is going to be one of mourning, but that also, for me anyway, that's been sort of a way for me to be present in my own existence. Like I truly do, I do savor those things in my life. I do enjoy them completely, no matter what it is, because it is facile, it is fleeting, it is, it is very private, it is very in the moment, and so it is to be savored by being here for now. You know what I mean? Because not only is it destined to go away, but it should go away.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this might be a weird question, but do you ever get resentful of your parents for giving birth to you? I mean, just, do you ever think that way, or?
I don't, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I've whatever amount of forgiveness that I've needed to do for my parents. I mean, I've done internally. I mean, my mother is very supportive of my worldview and the things that I do. I mean, she came to the premiere of my movie, so she knows. I mean, my father, I have a bit more negative feelings towards, because he had he basically, I mean, he had 2 children and abandoned both of them. Mm-hmm. So I mean, so I have, if he were, and he died years ago. I mean, if he were alive today, I think I'd have a couple extra things I'd like to say to him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it's I try not to get wrapped up in all that.
Right.
There are anti-natalists that I think are quite owned by that. But that's certainly not everybody's story.
And you would even say that's as an anti-natalist, that's not the healthiest way to live. Even though you are an anti-natalist, you can't have that resentment.
If you have those feelings, I mean, I wouldn't say, like, stop that, because that's not good anti-natalism. I mean, if that's part of what you feel, then you have to work through those feelings. However, but I don't think that it definitely shouldn't become the character of your antinatalism. I mean, antinatalism is far more than your own individualistic experiences, and it's not healthy. It's not the best place to stay. They caused you to exist, but make your life your own. From this point forward, live it the way you want to live it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take it back. They took it away. They took your peace away. So,
right.
The rest of it's yours.
And one thing I do appreciate about you, Amanda, is that you're not very imposing in your views, and you're not in your face, you're not in anyone's face saying you should be an anti-natalist. We should be thinking about this more. It's more of a you come from a place of, this is what I believe and this is why I think about it this way. And I saw a bunch of comments on the Soft White Underbelly video saying, I really appreciate the way Amanda speaks about it, because she just says, I believe that this is this, I believe that this is that. It's not, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. So I really appreciate that. And it goes back, I want to circle back to, what you say about, it kind of is connected to what you said before, that you love humanity and you love the things that people do and the art that people make and the creations and the different things that people invent, the inventions and stuff like that. So it's you do appreciate a lot of the things that life has to offer, but inherently the bottom line, it just comes down to the fact that giving birth to someone that you have no idea what their life course is going to take is a risk that is too precious to take on, essentially.
Yeah, that it comes at too high a cost. That the suffering is a currency that nobody can afford to pay in. That for all the good things that may come out of a life, the suffering, the death, this is an expense. This is a cost that nobody can afford. But I also just want to say thank you so much for saying what you did at the beginning there. I mean, I really do try to make an effort to, this is something that means a great deal to me. I know that these are sort of abhorrent thoughts to a lot of people. It's a very uncomfortable subject. It's a subject that brings up a lot of tough feelings for people. But I do think that this is an extremely important idea in the world, and I just think that it's an idea that deserves to be within the marketplace of ideas, and that it's really time for antinatalism in the sense that, it's an important thing to think about. And so
I mean, yeah, it's very, and I'm open-minded, and it's in a very interesting concept to me, but I will say respectfully that my goal is to, have kids and start a family, and it may very well be from a selfish standpoint, and, I will do my very best to make the best life for my offspring, my children, and there are a lot of things I won't be able to control, and I will need to be in a suitable situation for me to bring human life into the world. I wouldn't be able to do that right now because I'm not financially sustainable, and I that would be very selfish of me and very stupid of me to do that. And yeah, I mean, I still feel like that's just a big that's a big part of my legacy, is to bring kids into this world and bring a part of me into this world where they can create themselves. And for me to say that to you, does it make you cringe? Like when people say that they're gonna have a, when someone said that they're, if a couple comes up to you and says they're planning on having kids, or they're trying, does it make you
it to an extent, to be fair. Look, I sincerely hope that if you do make that decision, that it all turns out as best as it possibly can. I will say that you are in control of a lot less than you think. The possibility of what would happen? What would you say if your child became an antinatalist? I mean, what if you had a child that wanted to die at 18? I mean, what would your what would your answer to those children be? And I don't think that you. So my fear is for them. You know what I'm trying to say? It's not so much the decisions that you make. Well, it is the decisions that you make, but I'm just saying. I mean, I hope that you. First of all, I really do appreciate that you are somebody who is able to hear this idea and at least take it on board. Again, in the the marketplace of ideas within your head. I'm glad that it's an idea within your mind now. Regardless of the decision you make. I mean, most people can't do that, and so that's great. But yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things that we do when we create people is we also throw everybody else away, right? Like, there's all this need in the world. And as somebody that, I think your inclination to want to carry on parts of yourself, to, give parts of yourself to some new being, to maybe care for somebody. I mean, those are all good instincts. And I would say that there's a lot of people already here that could really benefit from those things that you have to offer. There's a lot of kids sitting in orphanages right now who really could use you as an influence. And so I would say that I hope that you think about it objectively, and I hope that you give the decision more thought, and I hope that you give the decision more thought in terms of what they will experience and the fact that you will not be able to control that experience to the extent that you maybe think you can.
I have way less control over things than I think I do. Yeah. No, and I agree, but I guess it's a risk I'm willing to take. Unfortunately for you, so I don't think.
No, unfortunately for that. Unfortunately for them.
Yeah, unfortunately for them.
The risk is not on me. The risk is on your children.
Right. Yeah.
And they might not thank you for it.
They might not thank me, and
they might want to die.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that to you to upset you. I'm not trying to say it to be provocative. I'm saying it to you because those are real circumstances in the world. Those are real things that happen to the people that we create.
Right.
And I think you do need to ask yourself what you can possibly be gaining from taking those risks that's worth imposing that on a new consciousness.
Right. Self-destruction is a real thing. Suicide is a real thing. Anxiety, mental illness, depression, all of that is a real thing that I, as a father, as a parent, cannot be able to control if it comes to it.
Yeah. And that's on them, not you. Your comfort level in that being the cost that they have to pay is not what matters. It's the fact that they're going to have to pay that price.
They have to pay.
I'm going to let Mo have the final thought here, but I just wanted to say one thing as we start to wind down here is one of the things that I've always found fascinating as I get into conversations, not only with friends, but even for family, and someone like my dad is, once in a while, he'll still ask me, don't you want to have kids? You should find yourself a woman and have some kids. I'm like, first of all, I'm 41, and I don't, even if I could have them right now, I don't want to be one of those old dads where, by the time, if I had a kid right now at 41, by the time they're 20, I'll be in my 60s. And I just don't want to be like an old dad and not around to see most of their life, right?
That's also a societal construct. I mean,
yeah, I know. Then the other thing too, and this is where I feel like a lot of people that just have kids don't really deeply think about, well, why do you want to have them? And I've asked my dad this, and he can't give me a good answer. It's like, well, don't you want to have somebody carry on the family name? I'm like, why? Who cares? Are we? Is the family name royalty for some reason? Is there a really good reason other than you just want the name to? That's just nonsense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I have a friend who goes, "I'm not a king, am I?" I mean, not that royalty should reproduce either, but yeah, I mean, it's all. There's so many sort of. It's such an. I don't even know how to say it. there's very ancient ways of thinking that we're just sort of slaves to, with where some of this is concerned. And when we do step back and analyze it a little bit, so much of it can sound kind of silly. And again, I think once you analyze the risks, once you analyze the costs, once you are able to sort of put yourself in that other person's shoes a little bit and consider what they might experience, for me anyway, it's like a house of cards. I mean, the reasons to take that risk just falls down flat on its face.
Yeah, and Amanda, is there anything you want to plug? You have a website. Where can people find you?
Sure, thanks so much. I appreciate that. So I have a show. It's been running for almost 5 years strong now. It's called the Exploring Antinatalism podcast. It used to be twice monthly. It is now once a month. And on that show, I interview antinatalists and non-antinatalists from all over the world, be they philosophers, activists, artists, all different kinds of people. So I very much invite everybody to come check that out. I mentioned this a little earlier in the interview, but I'll say it again. I just wrote, co-authored, and released my first academic paper alongside Finnish antinatalist philosopher Matti Häyry, called Imposing a Lifestyle, a New Argument for Antinatalism. It is on the Cambridge Quarterly of Healthcare Ethics. I would love it if people went and checked that out. And yeah, I have a movie by the title of The Ethalist. I made it in 2016. It was the first movie ever about antinatalism. And I assume perhaps links will be
where is that
somewhere.
available? Where can we watch that? Is that on streaming platforms? Can you buy it or rent it off of iTunes?
No, actually. So it used to be on YouTube, but my original YouTube channel was unceremoniously murdered off of YouTube by YouTube for no good reason. No strikes on the account, nothing, just was taken off of YouTube. So you can find it on Vimeo.
Okay. Awesome. This has been great, Amanda, and
It's been wonderful.
this has been very thought-provoking. I'm going to be listening to this episode again many times just to think about it, and I know a lot of people are going to be interested about it, and I want to prepare you for maybe a lot of comments of people disagreeing with you. So
I love it.
And it's I'm anticipating that will happen. Who knows? But
That's
I
great.
just want you to brace yourself a little bit on that behalf. But this has been great. I appreciate you coming on, and this is it's a very interesting topic that is gaining a lot of steam, like you said, and I sincerely thank you for this.
I thank you as well. Thank you so much to both of you. I really, really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a great conversation. And yeah, just thank you so much. I had a great time. This was wonderful.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was Enjoy Your 24, episode 58. And Amanda, we had Amanda on the podcast, anti-natalist. And this has been great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.